about is having to establish a country, right? Well, before you establish a country, you must first establish a culture. Remember, cultures create a country, not the other way around. So you have to first establish a culture, and people are still caught up in the culture war. And they're caught up in the culture war because, again, everybody's arguing about money. Everybody's arguing about the spending power. They're arguing about all these things. Now, if you recall, in a very first video I ever did, the primer video, it's on YouTube, you can look it up. I used a Fibonacci sequence of numbers, and I pointed out that if you change one number here at the very top, that means every successive answer after that, even if each individual answer is correct, the sequence is wrong. That's where we are right now. The sequence is so out of whack now that if you were to correct all these things, then all of this other shit goes away. That's terrifying for most people. For real. So it's like this is, so I'm answering, there was a question. I've been ruminating on this for a while now, and this is hard to answer this question because how do we fix all this? You first have to realize that a lot of it can't be fixed. A lot of this was an illusion. It really was an illusion. I think it was Ben Franklin that said when the continental dollar collapsed, what he said was that what's collapsing isn't wealth, or what's disappearing isn't wealth. What's disappearing is the illusion of wealth. That's what was starting to disappear. Your real wealth comes from something else, and it comes from your ability to actually hold together your culture and your civilization. And the U.S. has a problem with this, and it's a problem, and it isn't one-sided. That's the other thing that it really annoys me about both the right and the left and the libertarians. I have to flip you guys shit. You guys flip me shit all the time. So it's everybody's fault on this. Culturally speaking, everybody has to take some responsibility on this. Now I realize, again, I do understand that boomers in particular for the last 50 odd years have been voting a lot of this stuff. Okay, well, and that is, you can say like, well, but that's not generational. That's one of the complaints I get from boomers. But it's like, no, it actually is generational because Gen X, Millennials, and Zoomers wouldn't be voting for any of this shit. 90% of Gen X don't give a fuck about the war on drugs. They would vote to defund the DEA right now, most of them. Same with Millennials and Zoomers. They don't give a fuck about this stuff. That is a boomer thing, and it's to keep the profits high, for the cocaine people and the heroin people, to make sure that there's free flow of drugs at market prices, so that a handful of people in the cartel can stay rich and pay back all the bankers that have lent all the money to them to their operation, because that shit actually happens. We all know it. So to create a parallel economy, you have to be willing to create your own culture, and you have to be willing to stick with it. And what that means is, for example, not running down to the store to grab a dozen eggs from big egg companies, right? For example, I'm using this for example purposes, and instead saying, "Man, my chickens aren't laying. What's wrong with my chickens?" Or, "I don't have any chickens. You probably need to get some chickens." I'm using that as an example, but you get the idea. That's what would be required in order to have a parallel economy. It takes a discipline to do that. Look at the Amish. The Amish are a parallel economy. That is for real. They are a parallel economy, right? And you're like, well, but I want to have all the cool shit. That's sort of the challenge with it, isn't it? So if you want all the cool shit, then you have to continue to play this stupid game until the currency collapses. And it will eventually. The dollar will eventually just go tits up, and that'll be the end of it. And then they'll try and rush in with some kind of gimmick like CBDCs and what have you. And it's always going to be the same people that have fucked you the first time, right? Because for whatever reason, people are like that. Don't look for anybody new. Don't look for any fresh ideas. Don't bother to learn anything yourself. Oh, no. Instead, go to the same people that fucked you and ask them to unfuck you. Because, I don't know, people are just that way. People don't seem to think like, no, hey, you guys are the ones who cause these problems. We're going to go and look around for other people, right? You're looking for, it's where, I say this all the time. I don't think Americans want a president, right? I really don't think you do. I don't think most of you want president. I think most of you want a messiah. You want someone to show up and do everything for you. And You're never going to get that. You will never, I mean, you will never get a Messiah. You will never get a Messiah. You know, in that video where I did a few days back, you know, where somebody had asked me about Christianity, my thoughts on Christianity, and I gave my honest thoughts about what I think about you know, about Christ, the idea of Christ. I think that if Christ was real, he would not come back here to help any of you. None of you. None of you. He will not come back. Because all of this is all stuff that you can solve, right? Like, you can solve all these problems. You don't need a Messiah. You need to take the time to learn this shit. You need to take the time to actually observe the world around you and stop just taking everybody else's word for everything. You know, start learning for yourself. Start listening internally. Start looking inward a little bit and going, okay, well, you know, hold on, and then looking externally rather than just take everybody else's opinion for something. Start looking around a little bit yourself, right? There's two laws in this universe, or at least that govern this planet, whatever it is. So this reality, this 5 sense reality that we all share, whatever it is, there's two laws to it, and that's it. The laws of physics and the laws of conscience. That's it. There are no other laws. Everything else is something made up and invented by man to make money, or to be able to rip you off somehow. That's it. Now, as a culture, you can say, well, okay, how do we have a culture then? Well, as a culture, you could then ask the question, like, well, how do we have some basic laws? Well, okay, that's when the culture says, okay, listen, let's have some basic rules. How about we don't allow murder? We don't allow that. We don't allow just unaliving people because you want to. Okay, can we agree on that? Probably, right? And then we could go maybe and say, well, we don't want to have the government printing a bunch of money because that will cause all of this disaster we're getting right now, right? The bankers and governments printing money. Yeah, we don't want to have that. So as a culture, we can agree on that. So you don't have to have a whole lot of things. When you get rid of all the big stuff, you don't end up with no laws. You just end up with zillions of other laws. That's all that ends up happening with it. That's not even an original thought of mine. I mean, that's from other philosophers. You know, I'm a physicist, so I mean, physicist means that once you've conquered philosophy, you move into physics, you know, very rapidly, and you understand how the two are connected. So philosophy, you know, if you skip it, if you just go to physics, for example, I don't want to give you tear into you too much on this, but if you just go straight into math and physics, right, without any part of the philosophical, you spend all your time asking, can you do something? Could you do something, right? As opposed to if you take the long way around, in my opinion, the correct way, but the long way around, and you get a little bit of philosophical in there, and then you add the physics to it, and you start understanding the physics, then you start asking, should you do something? That's important, right? We all learned that from Jurassic Park. Should you do something? Because it's not always a good idea to do some of the stuff that we're doing as people, right? It's like, yeah, you can do it. It doesn't mean you should do it. Yes, you can take advantage of a whole bunch of people who don't understand how money works. Should you do it? No, you shouldn't do it. You shouldn't do it. But you know what? Hey, if your conscience can allow you to do that, then I guess go right ahead. But the other side of conscience, and I've covered this a long time ago, I'll cover it again as a review. There's two sides to conscience. See, a lot of you think it's just the one because it's all you're ever taught. All you're ever taught is like, is that you'll feel bad about something. You're taught about that one level of conscience. The other side of conscience is saying something like, I can't in good conscience allow you to continue doing what you're doing, right? I can't allow you in good conscience to continue, for example, arresting people who have defended themselves from a bunch of fucking illegals, right? You're arresting them even though they defended themselves against an illegal who was assaulting them, right? And yeah, so what you do is you turn that around and say, okay, listen, you know, pig person, I can't allow you in good conscience to do this. That's the other side of that. That's the side that it provokes action, right? That's the part that says, okay, I guess I have to do something about this. I can go no far further than that in this conversation as to what that kind of action would be, but you've got a good imagination, I imagine, and our fiction is full of it. U.S. fiction is full of how to handle these situations. It's just a matter of people doing it now. So in your parallel economy, you have to be able to address these among other problems. And that's the first step. The first step, of course, is very similar to what I said with the Texit video. How are you going to handle the money? And then, of course, realize that your wealth isn't going to be like the wealth that you're used to. That's tough. That's probably not going to happen. You're not going to have that same kind of wealth. I hope that helps.